Let's talk a little bit about what happened with Tottenham last night, though, because that's the one that's dominating all the headlines because of the confrontation afterwards between Ange Postecoglou and a couple of fans. He wasn't happy about what was said, but he understood it, he said. So what's the situation? Have they snapped now, the Tottenham fans, because they're fed up with being inconsistent consistently? Their defeat by Bournemouth leaves them in 10th in the Premier League table, which is one place below the Cherries. There's a few things here. Bournemouth should have won by more. Mm-hmm. Spurs have got injuries coming out of their ears, especially at the back. Ben Davies, another one who's picked up a problem this week, could have only one fit centre-half by the time they take on Chelsea. They continue to have a problem with set pieces. And you've got the Ange reception. So the question to the Spurs fan, I suppose, this morning is this what you were expecting from this season? And how are you going to negotiate 7 games in 21 days with all these injuries? And is this the biggest test of Ange's philosophy?
There's a lot to unpack in that. Yes, it's a massive test. I don't understand what he was expecting by going over to the fans. Was he expecting to get them to say thanks for trying? I don't know. I think my big question to Spurs fans is what is the expectation? I suppose with the manager coming out says he wins stuff and his second year he always wins something. I suppose that expectation grows bigger, but it's always been a nice club, hasn't it? I just expect Spurs to be somewhere between 3rd and 8th every year. If it's a really good year, they'll finish 3rd. If it's a normal year, they're finishing that 7th or 8th.
Has he made a rub for his own back, though, by saying the words, I always win a trophy in my second year? Because if you look at the way we are at the moment with the problems that they've got at the back, problems that they've got with their injuries, Chelsea at home at the weekend, they go to Rangers away.
Yeah.
Southampton away is a different kettle of fish. They should be expected to win that. But then that's just before they play Manchester United at home in a huge Carabao Cup quarter-final, which actually takes on huge significance.
Absolutely. You just go through those games. I'd expect them to play better against Chelsea, beat Rangers, lose to Southampton.
Because
that's what Spurs do. Every time you think, right, go and make a step. So they beat Man City, they then go and play Fulham, and you're like, right, this is the game to go and kick on. And they just don't. They just turn up flat. And I don't know whether it's a manager's problem, a player's problem. I'm not sure. It's just every time.
It wasn't that long ago that they beat Manchester City 4-0.
I know, and no one expected it to happen. And you go, oh right, go on then, kick on, show us who you really are. And since then, it's been a bit of a damp squid, hasn't it? Unfortunately, so it's a bit disappointing. And I think for the talent that they have, you would argue that they should be better off. I think, look, defensively, it's always been an issue anyway in terms of injuries and who they've got in depth. So you have to just look at it now and say, kind of, have they recruited really well? I would argue not.
I wonder whether or not that the players are suffering from a bit of mixed messaging as well, because you had the situation last night where he said in the press conference afterwards, and I don't know whether or not he is sort of giving us mixed messages or whether it's just proving the fact that when he goes into a press conference after a game, he's just fobbing us mere mortals off. He said, we just don't have this real understanding of the game state to not allow the opposition to turn the tide and play the game on their terms. That's what he said last night. This is what he said back in February.
The clock and the scoreboard shouldn't dictate how you play. So if that's your mentality, we should always be looking for goals, irrespective of sort of whether we're winning 1-0 or losing 1-0. Now, sometimes that kind of feels counterintuitive when you're winning 1-0, but I think it helps you in games like this when you're chasing the game, because really you don't have to change anything. There's no instructions for me. The players know, well, this is what we do anyway, so it doesn't mean a major shift. And I think if you're trying to become a team that's dominant and wins games of football, I just felt I'd rather err on that side than sort of try and protect things that you have.
So last night he was talking about worrying about the game state and the players don't have the ability to change in game depending on what the score is. Before that, he said the clock on the scoreboard shouldn't dictate how you play. Can you understand then why people were getting a little bit confused with some of the messaging that's coming out?
Yeah, and I think I understand what he's saying. Even I'm a little bit confused listening to the two, for being totally honest with you. What he's trying to say is fundamentally, if we're 1-0 up, I don't want us to sit back and get counter-attacked and little horrible 1-1. We want us to go and try and go 2 and 3. And if we're losing, we need to go and score anyway. So the mentality should be the same. That, as a standalone message, makes an awful lot of sense. But then to say we're not understanding the game states, I'd say, well, surely that was rectified after Brighton. because they were winning at Brighton, and then they didn't rectify the game state then when it was just wave after wave of Brighton coming forward. So I think when you, as a manager, you say things like that, you open yourself up for the likes of us to interpret it and say, well, why didn't you rectify that after Brighton then? That was a few weeks ago. And then when this situation happened, you should now be like, right, here's what we do, because we've gone over it and we've rehearsed it. I just think at the moment, I think he's frustrated. I don't think he's looking for excuses. I haven't heard him mention injuries too much, unlike other teams in the past when they've had an injury or two. And I think he's a little bit frustrated, it's coming a little bit on top for him at the moment. And I always think as well, so I know he's going to talk, I think when you're going on your own, who's he got to talk to in that building? Who's his sounding board? Who's his, let's go to a little room and have a coffee and I want to vent.
Because he's not the most sociable character, we understand, even in and around the training ground, right?
Yeah.
So when we speak to him, he's very sort of like, I don't do small talk. I come in, I do the interview, I look down at my shoes and I get out.
Yeah.
That's how he is.
Yeah.
And you've seen that on television. You would have seen that in press conferences. He's a bit like that, from what we understand, in and around the dressing room as well.
Yeah. So I'm just for him now as an individual, who's he bouncing the ideas off? Who's he going, right, I'm not sure if I've got everyone on side. Who's I don't know, you normally have like an assistant or a goalkeeping coach or something where you just go, what are you feeling? What's your vibrations? Give me a shout of what everyone's thinking. And I just think at the moment that place could turn very, very quickly.
You just said there, have I got everyone on board? Do you think that there's a scenario here where he might not have everyone on board?
Yeah, that's going to happen anyway. You've got 25 lads who think they should be playing. You've got a massive group of people in terms of staff, kit men, etc. Who probably, some people might, depend on what days off you have, might not work with their childcare. So you're going to always got to upset somebody.
Forget about those things, don't we? When we talk about football.
You got to upset somebody. I just think it's just a case of when it starts going a little bit awry, and fans are turning. It's easier for those squad players to, instead of 1 or 2 being unhappy, it's now 6, 7 or 8.
talkSPORT Breakfast, waking you up Monday to Friday morning from 6 a.m. on AM, on DAB, via the talkSPORT app and on your smart speaker. talkSPORT.